What if I told you that every country, but yes, even yours, is drowning in debt? Not just little IOUs, but mountains of money owed to someone else. Stick around, because today we're diving into why this happens, who's lending the cash, and why debt might actually be kind of a big deal. Let me hit you with a wild fact. Some of the wealthiest countries in the world are buried in debt. Not by a little, but by trillions. You've seen the headlines. The UK just spent billions. Again, while debt hits record highs. And you think, wait, aren't we broke already? Here's the strange part. This isn't just a UK thing. It's not even a poor country thing. It's everywhere. Japan owes more than double what its economy makes. The US, $36 trillion in debt, and still borrowing more by the second. But it's not always reckless spending or bad planning. The truth is more layered, and honestly, more eye-opening. In this video, I'm breaking it all down, what national debt really means, why countries keep borrowing, where the money comes from, and what happens when things go too far. We'll also look at real-world chaos, like Greece's financial collapse, and the surprising ways some countries stay afloat, even with massive debt. By the end, you won't just understand debt. You'll see the system in a whole new way. So, what exactly is national debt? Think of it like this, just like you might take a loan to buy a house or pay for school. Governments also borrow money when they don't have enough to cover their spending. But here's the difference. Instead of borrowing from one bank or one person, a country borrows from a mix of people and institutions. It could be everyday citizens buying government bonds. It could be local banks, investment funds, or even other countries. Sometimes they even borrow from their own agencies or central banks. Now, here's something people often get mixed up. National debt doesn't include what you owe on your credit card. It's not your student loans. It's not your mortgage or what your state or province might owe either. When we say national debt, we're only talking about the money borrowed by the federal or central government, nothing else. For example, the U.S. national debt refers only to the borrowing done by the federal government in Washington, D.C. That means if the state of California takes out a loan to build new highways, or Texas borrows to expand schools, that's not part of the national debt. It's separate. So when people throw around those huge debt numbers on the news, like $36 trillion, remember, it's not about personal debt or what your local government is doing. It's what the top-level government has borrowed to keep the entire country running. Why do countries borrow? Let's break this down with something simple. Imagine a country like a household. You've got bills to pay: rent, groceries, electricity. Now say you're making $3,000 a month, but your actual expenses hit $4,000. That's a $1,000 shortfall. You're in a hole. So what do? You've really got three choices. Cut back on spending, find a way to earn more, or borrow the difference. Governments face the same situation. Except instead of rent, they're funding things like schools, hospitals, roads, and public safety. And when tax revenue doesn't cover everything, that's what's called a budget deficit. Now cutting spending might sound responsible, but which programs do you slash? Education? Healthcare? Infrastructure? These cuts hit real people, and the backlash can be intense. Protests, headlines, political pressure. Not to mention the damage it can do in the long run. And raising taxes? That's a fast way to make life harder for ordinary people. Costs go up, and public trust goes down. It's a tightrope. So what's left? Borrowing. And for many governments, it's the fastest way to keep things running without lighting everything on fire. But borrowing isn't always a sign of trouble. Sometimes it's a smart move and investment in future growth. Think about a small town with no hospital. The population's growing, but they can't afford to build a facility right now. So they wait, and people keep suffering. Kids don't get proper care. The economy stalls because people move away. But what if that town borrowed the money and built the hospital today? Now there are jobs. Lives get saved. The local economy gets a real shot of energy. That's how governments see things too. They borrow to build now roads, power grids, public transport so the economy grows faster. And future tax revenue can help pay off that debt later. Then come the moments where borrowing isn't about strategy. It's about survival. In 2020, when COVID hit, the U.S. government borrowed $3.8 trillion, which was more than 18% of the country's entire GDP, just to stop the economy from crashing. That money went to stimulus checks, business relief, vaccine rollouts. It wasn't optional. Without it, millions of jobs would have vanished. Entire industries could have gone under. Sometimes, countries don't borrow because they want to. They borrow because they have to. But there's another layer to this. Let's say a country borrowed money in 2010, and the loan's due in 2020. But in 2020, the country still doesn't have enough to pay it back. What now? They take out another loan to pay off the old one. It sounds risky, and it can be. But it's actually common. Just like a person transferring credit card balances to buy time, countries roll over their debt. As long as it's managed well, it works. But when it's not, things fall apart fast. Look at Sri Lanka in 2022. It defaulted on $51 billion in foreign debt. The country literally couldn't keep the lights on. Inflation soared. Protests erupted. The economy froze. People went from middle class to desperate practically overnight. That's the danger when debt grows faster than your ability to control it. But not all borrowing is about plugging holes. Sometimes it's used as a tool to control inflation and interest rates. Think of government bonds like sponges. When inflation is too high, prices rising too fast, the government can sell bonds. People buy them, and that money gets pulled out of the system, which helps cool things down. Less money floating around equals lower demand equals prices settle. On the flip side, when the economy slows down, like during a recession, governments can borrow more, inject cash back into businesses, and try to kickstart activity again. It's not magic, and it doesn't always work perfectly. But in theory, this is one way governments use borrowing to shape the economy, not just patch it up. So, to sum it all up, governments borrow for 5 main reasons. To fill budget gaps, to invest in growth, to deal with emergencies, to roll over old debts, to guide inflation and interest rates. Some of it's smart, some of it's necessary, and sometimes it's just a risky bet. But behind every loan, there's always a bigger story. Who lends to countries? Okay, so here's a question that surprises most people. Who actually has billions, sometimes trillions, just sitting around to lend to governments? Where's that kind of money even coming from? Well, the answer isn't as mysterious as it seems. Governments don't just knock on the door of one megabank. They borrow from multiple sources, some close to home, some halfway across the world. Let's start with domestic lenders, which could even include you. If you've ever bought a government bond, or your retirement fund holds bonds, guess what? You've loaned money to your country. Same goes for big commercial banks, investment funds, and even government agencies. Here's a quick example. In the U.S., a huge portion of the national debt, about $7.3 trillion, or 20%, isn't owed to other countries. It's owed internally, mostly to Social Security and other trust funds. These agencies use extra money to buy government bonds so they can earn interest and grow their budgets. It's like the government borrowing from its own pockets. Then you've got foreign lenders, countries, banks, and global investors from all over the map. Take Japan and China, for example. They hold massive amounts of U.S. debt, about $700 billion and $1 trillion each. Why? Because U.S. Treasury bonds are seen as stable and safe, it's not just about helping another country. It's about parking money somewhere reliable. Where? It earns interest with low risk, but here's where it gets tricky. If a country's economy is weak, it usually can't raise money that way. Investors don't trust it enough. They're worried it won't be able to pay the money back. So those countries turn to other options like the World Bank, regional development banks, or the IMF. Let's talk about the World Bank first. Their focus is mostly on building things: roads, schools, power stations, especially in developing countries. They offer lower interest loans with longer repayment periods. But these loans come with conditions. The government might need to change policies, meet performance targets, or follow strict plans about how the money is spent. Then there's the IMF, the safety net for countries in real trouble. They're not in the business of funding new highways. They're there to stop financial collapse. Think of them like the emergency hotline. When a country can't pay its bills, its currency is crashing, and no one else will lend, it's the IMF that steps in. But those loans come at a cost. IMF doesn't just hand over the money. They attach tough conditions, like cutting government spending, raising taxes, or privatizing public companies. It's painful. Countries like Greece, Argentina, and Indonesia have all had to take this path. It kept their economies from total failure, but also triggered protests, wage freezes, and years of economic hardship. It's a short-term fix that can come with a long recovery. Now, there's one more source that raises eyebrows: centralbanks.in. Theory: a government can borrow from its own central bank. Here's how it works. The central bank prints new money and uses it to buy government bonds. It sounds suspicious, like the government printing money just to pay itself. And in some cases, that's not far off. But in practice, it's usually done with a different purpose: to manage interest rates or control inflation. Let's say inflation is low and the economy is slowing down. The central bank might step in and buy bonds to inject money into the system. That helps encourage spending and boost growth. On the flip side, if prices are rising too fast, they can sell bonds to pull money out of circulation and cool things down. But here's the warning sign. If a country leans on this tool too much, it can set off hyperinflation. That's when prices skyrocket, savings become worthless, and the entire currency loses value fast. We've seen it happen in Venezuela and Zimbabwe, where printing too much money made everyday goods cost more than people could afford. So, who's lending the countries? It's a mix. Sometimes it's regular people and banks. Sometimes it's global powerhouses like China. Sometimes it's international institutions like the IMF. And sometimes it's a country borrowing from itself. The method may change. The reasons may vary. But at the end of the day, someone, somewhere, is always footing the bill. Is national debt bad or good? Here's something most people don't realize. Debt isn't always a bad thing. In fact, it's just a tool. What matters is how it's used. Think about it like this. If you take out a loan to buy a car that helps you get to work and earn more money, that's a smart move. But if you're borrowing just to pay off another loan with no plan to fix the root problem, you're heading toward trouble. Countries work the same way. When a government borrows to build new highways, upgrade airports, or invest in healthcare and education, it's putting money into the future. These projects create jobs, improve lives, and help the economy grow faster. Over time, that growth generates more tax revenue, which makes it easier to repay the debt. It's a responsible strategy, like a homeowner renovating the house to increase its value. Or take emergencies. When disaster strikes, a pandemic, a war, a natural catastrophe, borrowing can be the only way to respond quickly. You can't wait years to save up for vaccines or disaster relief. In moments like that, debt becomes a lifeline. But debt turns Dangerous when it becomes a habit borrowing, just to keep up with past borrowing. That's like using one credit card to pay off another. At some point, the interest catches up with you. And for a country, that's when things start to crack. Debt becomes a threat when interest payments eat up more of the national budget than schools, hospitals, or essential services. It's no longer about helping people. It's about surviving. From one payment to the next dot. And when lenders start to doubt whether a country can repay its loans, they demand higher interest rates. That's when the spiral begins. Just like people have credit scores, countries do too. And when that score drops, borrowing becomes more expensive and harder to get. That's exactly what happened to Sri Lanka. By 2022, its debt had become too big to handle. It defaulted on $51 billion, and the entire economy went into crisis. People waited in long lines for fuel. Food became scarce. Schools and businesses shut down, all because the warning signs were ignored for too long. So, how do you even measure when debt is too much? One way is to look at the debt to GDP ratio. That just compares how much a country owes to the size of its economy. For example, if a country has a $100 billion economy and owes $60 billion, its debt to GDP ratio is 60%. Pretty straightforward. Many economists say anything under 60% is manageable. It means the country still has room to borrow when needed, without scaring off investors. But of course, some of the biggest economies don't stay within that range. The U.S., for example, is way past it sitting at a level that would be alarming for most other countries. But because the U.S. dollar is the global reserve currency, it's been able to carry higher debt without collapsing. At least for now. And that brings us to something a bit strange, the debt ceiling. In America, there's actually a legal limit on how much the federal government can borrow. Sounds responsible, right? In theory, it's meant to prevent reckless spending. But here's the twist. Every time the limit is reached, Congress just raises it. Every single time. What's meant to be a financial control often turns into political theater, last-minute debates, threats of shutdowns, market panic. And then they raise it anyway. The ceiling doesn't really stop borrowing. It just creates more drama around it. So back to the big question. Is debt good or bad? The answer is, it depends. Used wisely, debt helps a country grow. Used carelessly, it tears the economy apart. It's not about whether debt exists. It's about how well it's managed. Can a country ever be debt-free? So, here's a thought. Could a country ever wake up one morning and say, "That's it. We've paid off everything. No more debt"? Technically? Sure, it's possible. But realistically? That's a whole different story. Let's start with a real example that often gets mentioned, Macau. On paper, Macau has zero debt. That's impressive. But here's what most people miss. Macau isn't even a country. It's a special administrative region of China. And while it looks good on financial charts, the reason it can stay debt-free has a lot to do with scale and luck. For one, it's tiny, only about 700,000 people, packed into an area half the size of Manhattan. It doesn't have to manage a massive army, a national healthcare system, or a space agency. And here's the kicker: casinos. Macau earns billions from gambling, more than Las Vegas. That's like having an endless money fountain without needing to borrow a dime. But let's be honest, you can't turn the United States or any major country into one big casino. That model just doesn't scale. Big nations have complex needs: defense, healthcare, schools, disaster relief. And these things cost money, lots of it. So if a major country ever did try to wipe out all of its debt, what would that actually look like? Well, for starters, it would take massive spending cuts. That means fewer teachers, fewer hospital beds, fewer social safety nets. Or, on the flip side, higher taxes across the board. Either option would hit hard. People would feel it immediately, and it probably wouldn't go over well. Imagine entire communities losing basic services or families struggling under sudden tax hikes. It would trigger widespread protests, no matter which path was taken. But here's something even more surprising. Being debt-free might actually cause new problems. Why? Because debt isn't just a burden, it's also a financial tool. When governments issue bonds, it gives people and institutions a safe place to invest their money. These bonds are considered low risk. Pension funds, for example, rely on them to grow steadily over time. So do insurance companies, universities, and even small investors. If there were no government bonds because the country had no debt, that entire safe investment layer disappears. Pension plans would be forced to invest in riskier markets. Retirees would face more uncertainty. Financial systems would become more volatile. In trying to fix one problem, you could accidentally create a much bigger one. So maybe the real question isn't, can a country be debt-free? It's whether it even should be. Because when managed well, debt helps countries invest in progress, respond to emergencies, and support their people. The real risk isn't the debt itself, it's letting it grow without a plan. Your debt quiver? So, here's what it all comes down to. Every country you can think of has debt. Rich, poor, large, small, it's the norm, not the exception. But the real takeaway isn't that debt exists. It's understanding what it actually means. Debt by itself isn't the villain. It's just a tool. A powerful one. Used wisely, it helps countries grow. It builds highways, powers hospitals, funds research, and supports people when times get tough. It can literally save lives during a crisis like when COVID hit and governments had no choice but to spend big, fast. But when it's used carelessly just to plug holes, push problems forward, or impress voters, it backfires fast. That's when interest payments eat into school budgets. That's when healthcare suffers. That's when trust fades. And once confidence in a country drops, everything gets harder. Borrowing costs go up, investment dries up, and the economy starts to wobble. So really, debt isn't the issue. Management is. Planning is. And next time you hear someone shout, "Why is our country drowning in debt?" you'll know what to say. Debt isn't the enemy. Irresponsibility is. What's next? So now you've got the big picture. But here's something to think about. Why is it that some countries handle massive debt like it's no big deal, while others fall apart? There's more to that story, and if you want it, I might break it down next. Or maybe you've wondered what actually happens when a country defaults. It's not the same as someone missing a credit card payment. It's way messier. If you want that explained, drop it in the comments. I read everyone. And hey, if this helped clear up the chaos around national debt, tap that like button. Subscribe. Hit the bell, and you'll always get clear, real explanations minus the noise. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.